Hi, everybody. I hope everyone is enjoying their long Thanksgiving weekend, and I hope your Thanksgiving was a great one. This mine certainly was. And I also know that by this time everybody's already chomping at the bit regarding to the weather changes that are going on. These are wholesale changes that are occurring over not just North America, but the Arctic region and over Siberia that are in play. And I think we're going to eventually evolve into a very interesting pattern that should give the I-95 corridor a chance for some accumulating snow, and in some places for the first time in a couple of years. But first off, I want to start off with the upper air from a couple of days ago because you'll see the radical change in over the next 16 days that occurs. First off, obviously you can see this. You have this ridge in the east. You have a trough down in the west. You have lower pressures, mostly up in the North Atlantic and in the Arctic region, and that is, of course, creating issues. Allows the ridge to build in the east, the trough in the west, but the changes are starting with troughing that is beginning to show up along 160 degrees west along the longitude of Hawaii, and that's very important in the long term. And as we move along, I've left the initial markings, which carry us start from 3 days ago. So we're talking back on Wednesday. And as we rotate along, you're going to see the upper air gradually change. First off, there's going to be our storm system that we have to deal with for Monday, and you see it here, lifting up from the south. And the second storm system that is dropping down and around, that's going to be around for the end of the week, the end of next week and next weekend. Those two systems are going to run up the Appalachians. Those two systems are required, in my view, to move in a way that drives the overall pattern change. And I've stopped this at this point, which is on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday. Notice that we have higher pressures all across Canada and lower pressures out to the south. Deep trough out in the Pacific from the Aleutians down to Hawaii. The Greenland upper low has now shifted a little bit further to the east, and you have higher pressures building across much of northern Europe and over Scandinavia. So right off the bat, you've got changes going on. It's really going to take both those storms to take the whole process through. So it's after the second one goes by that we're going to start paying closer attention to possibilities of wintry weather coming into the Northeast. As always, it's tenuous, but this is how the game is played. The second one lifts up, and I think that is going to be coming through for next weekend. And at this point, one of the things that we are at December 6th now, so after this, we continue to see rising pressures all up in the North Atlantic and over Greenland, dropping pressures in eastern Canada with troughing moving southward, rising pressures up into Alaska. You have a split flow out in the Pacific here with energy in the southern stream moving along, and then you have the northern stream that's kind of running like this. It's a little bit of a crazy quilt setup, but this is where eventually snow events are born, when you have this quilt of many different things going on in the atmosphere, as opposed to saying one deep trough and one strong upper air ridge. And right through the forecast period, we're still seeing that idea intact. Now, on today's run at the end of the period, a couple of people said to me, well, it looks like the ridge is back into the east. Well, yes and no. What's happening is one trough arm is pulling out, but you'll notice that in central Canada here, the main the main upper low is still there. And it's just a matter of time before the next arm rotates around it. It pushes eastward. The other thing that I find very intriguing here is we've got a blocking Greenland high that builds here. So there is a bit of a block that's going on. And while the upper air might look as if it's warming up, if you look at the bottom of the atmosphere, you actually have cold air at the lower levels of the atmosphere holding on. So I think it's going to be, as I said, I think it's going to be an interesting situation as we head into the middle part of the month. I think we're going to get a couple of opportunities for snow out of this. I find it difficult to imagine that we won't. The other thing, by the way, let me just go back to this. The other thing I've been focusing on with respect to the changes, think back, I started mentioning this a couple of weeks ago, was the polar vortex in the stratosphere, that it was that tight little ball, which is what you see when you have Arctic air that's trapped up to the north, that it was stretching out, that the upper low itself was migrating over toward northern Greenland. And indeed, if you look at this, this is exactly what happens. And the vortex is strong, but it is also spread out, just sort of getting all stretched out, particularly in the eastern part of the United States. And I believe that it's the tilt of this and the stretching that is creating these changes in the lower atmosphere. I guess the $1 million question is this going to be a temporary change that lasts a couple of weeks, and then we go back to the ridge in the east, trough in the west scenario? That's something I really don't know. I know a lot of people emotionally are, acting like children and saying that that's what's going to happen, but there's no way of knowing if that's the way this is all going to play out. So in the meantime, let's just go back and look at these storm systems that are going to be moving into the eastern part of and through the eastern part of the United States. Two strong Appalachian systems running up the east side of the Appalachians, but no redevelopment. There's no ridge that's kind of out in the Atlantic isn't strong enough yet to force the primary low to redevelop to the east. So it looks like you get the primary low just kind of moving northward and deepening. You see the two phases here, the northern and southern stream phase together, wraps up into a nice looking cutoff low, moving into the eastern part of the United States, and then lifting up to the northeast. This is the system for Monday, very vigorous. Right behind it, shortwave moves into the northwest, into southwestern Canada. That drops down, and there you go. One lifts up, the other one rotates down and around it, and then comes to the east. And this is the one for next weekend. And then there's yet another arm that aids in lifting it up. You see it there kind of stretching into the Great Lakes. There's more energy down into the southwest. That's off of Baja. This is your very vigorous system here in the eastern part of the United States. I think the one at the end of next week or into next weekend could be an interesting snow producer for areas well inland, up the Appalachians and on up into interior New England. I'm thinking that for the coast, we're still going to be, it's kind of a stair-step decline with respect to cold air. So I'm thinking it's going to be after this one where cold air might be a bit more available over time. And then what I would suggest is you keep an eye on this flow here in Canada, because I think you're going to see systems diving southeastward over time. And here's how it amplifies quite a bit, this northwest flow, as we head into days 11 and 12 in the long range. You see how it all of a sudden all that blue appears. Well, those are shortwave troughs that are dropping down. I think you have to watch for the possibility that any one of these shortwaves that are moving southeastward, that any one of these in the flow could wind up digging down or diving down and carving out some kind of trough in the eastern part of the United States. You saw some hints of that in the overnight guidance. You still see some hints of it here, but there's a lot of shortwave energy running around. So if there's too much energy running around, then no one system can dominate. So you want to watch for one of these systems to be vigorous. Late in the forecast period, today's model run takes one of those strong shortwaves and drops it into the west. I don't know if that's real or not, and even if it is, again, I would just point out that you do have some blocking going on in the middle of the month if the model is correct over the North Atlantic, and that might make a big difference here. The ridge is going to have you need a little bit of ridging in the east ahead of any system that's coming out of the west. Obviously, if you have too much, then you have a storm that goes to your west, but you do need a little bit of ridging, otherwise you get a low that's pretty flat and runs out to the east. So it's always that that delicate balance. But I do like the overall scheme of things. Certainly, it's a lot better than what we saw through the month of November. So when you compare it to that, you know, it is night and day. There's the one issue that you have here is with respect to a true Arctic connection. That is going to be a little bit tough to come by. You're going to have to do it with cold polar Canadian air, which I would say if you were at the end of December and January, it probably would be enough. If you're in the beginning to the middle part of the month, it becomes a little more tenuous, but certainly not impossible when it comes to generating some winter weather. So again, just going from the scheme of the latest run of the models with regards to these weather systems that we're dealing with, first for tonight and tomorrow. So here you have low pressure runs out of the Gulf states Sunday. Monday morning, it's in central North Carolina. You've got heavy rain moving up the coast. And by the way, the Storm Prediction Center has a marginal risk of severe weather from New York City southward because of the low going by to our west. I think we're going to see some windswept soaking rains here and possibly some thunderstorms. Some snow gets generated on the backside. The NAM, oddly enough, is actually fairly generous with the snow area that runs down through the central Appalachians and almost makes it into northern Georgia, which is where I might be on Monday. And if I drive back up 81 on Tuesday, I could probably drive into some of that snow. But again, this is a rain event and not a shocker. It also takes a while for the upper feature to get out of the way, so it looks like the weather's going to be still pretty unsettled on Tuesday. And on the windy side, same for Wednesday. And then finally, maybe on Thursday, you get a break. But here comes the next system setting up for Friday into Saturday. Low pressure this time along the Carolina coast. It moves northward into central Virginia. Again, this is another one that runs east of the Appalachians, and the GFS actually makes it pretty deep. It's got a 975 low near Harrisburg next Sunday that runs up into New York State. That's a pretty, again, very vigorous in the upper feature. This is going to be a pretty potent system if this is correct. I would just be cautious right now with respect to what it's showing as far as precip type and where. I think there's a lot to be worked out here in terms of how much do-it-yourself cold air you're going to have given the upper features. You see a little the GFS, which is showing some heavier snows down in West Virginia and the central Appalachians, but this would be a pretty solid wind and rain event for the mid-Atlantic on up into southern New England, particularly behind it. My God, the gradient is so incredibly tight here with that low that eventually winds up near Cape Cod. So even though it may not be snow for the coast, it certainly could be a pretty wicked storm system that goes by, and maybe some snows for inland areas upstate New York. And then gradually, of course, as after that second low goes by, you start to see there is colder air and genuine colder air that starts to come into the Northeast behind that second system. So the atmosphere's got work to do, clearly, with regards to getting that cold air. We're certainly going to at least see our temperatures trend down close to average, or maybe even a bit below average. As we remember, beginning of December, the average high in New York City anyway is in the upper 40s. So if you're talking upper 40s to around 50, you need an anomaly of minus 10 or minus 15 just to keep temperatures from getting out of the 30s. And that requires some Arctic air to get involved, and that connection right now is a little bit tough. But again, as a snow lover, I'm always running optimistic from that standpoint. I'm neutral when it comes to the forecast, but my heart is there to see the little white flakes fall down. It's always nice, especially as we approach Christmas. And you know what? Given the kind of year we've had, a little bit of snow out there isn't going to hurt anybody. At least I don't think it is. I think it'll look nice. Okay, I'm kind of slowly winding down the end of my trip here, and we'll have the Joe and Joe weather show tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock Eastern time. At least that's the plan at the moment. That's always subject to change without notice, just letting you know. In the meantime, you've got the rest of today where the weather is very good. Same for tomorrow, should be fine. And then you'll get into that heavy rain for Monday, and we'll see you hopefully tomorrow, and enjoy the rest of your holiday weekend.